Okay, so hello everybody. I'm very happy to have the Tournesol talk. It's been a while, but thanks to Adrien and thanks to Titouan, we have finally an event. So today we welcome Adrien Tallent, who's a PhD candidate in philosophy at Sorbonne University, and he's going to tell us about redefining the social contract in the digital age. Adrien, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, I'm glad to relaunch the Tunnel Talks in 2025. Indeed, I'm going to present, which is the main topics of my PhD subject, which is the redefinition of the notion of the social contract in the digital age. So the idea now is to present some of the main issues of this research, and at the end I'll get more into the perspective and my ongoing reflections on the core of my thesis. And so, of course, all comments, questions, everything are more than welcome, even during my presentation. Maybe to start, I always start a little bit with the same observation, which is that not a day goes by without the media or companies talking about uh, technology in a broad sense. It could be artificial intelligence, social networks, and so especially in times of political discussion and political debates and elections, etc. And because so we seem to be living through a technological revolution that will have and is already having an impact on our society, our lives, our democracies, especially because more and more algorithms and systems like AI-based systems are playing an important role in our lives. So of course, all those systems promises to be very helpful in many fields. It could be in healthcare, language preservation, translation, security, weather forecasting, etc. And so today, in a way, we can say that nothing seems to structure our lives more than data, because every time we visit a website with a smartphone, participate in a video conference, etc., we leave traces, which are kind of digital footprints that are then used to retrace our digital path. And so afterward, those automated systems are massively used in many areas of political, social, economic life, etc. And so maybe to start a little, I often start with this observation that is to say that we as consumer citizens, individuals, employees, we are at every second of our days of our lives um, facing those very systems using our data uh, to present us some recommendations, to influence our next buy, to influence what we are going to watch, to learn, to meet, who to meet. It could be even romantically. So in social networks, of course, which is kind of the starting point of this whole discussion tonight. So it could be in order to highlight some content, to personalize the display content for the users. And so all those models learn our likes and dislikes, and so they tell us what to watch, what to read, who to meet. They are used in insurance companies as well to calculate our risk profile based on our data, on our behavior, our health, etc. And so, of course, the question is raised of a change in the decision-making systems, the decision-making processes at the scale of the society. And also, many of them tend to see. Oh, I didn't translate the slide, but well, police predictive, which is predictive police. Many tend to see these tools as neutral, infallible, perfectly rational beings, and whose help could be very helpful in order to delegate centered tasks or even responsibilities. And so, in exchange for a service, which is usually free of charge, the users delegate whether consciously or not, part of their decision-making power, as well as, we could say, the possibility to influence their choices, opinions, desire. And so now, so massive data collection and the generalization and the development of all those kind of automated systems seems to pose a threat to society, to democracy, and so ultimately to the notion of the social contract. So we will get to that afterwards, which is just for now to say, which is kind of the foundation of our modern conception of the state and of what is the state. So the starting point of my presentation, and for you, like the interest of Titouan on my work, was this article published in Le Monde, which is, well, in French, but it's on the transformation of the social networks in times of in kind of electorate political fighting areas, and the idea that they pose a threat, and so threats to democracy. So I wrote it following Donald Trump's victory, and especially with the role played by Elon Musk and X, which, well, formerly Twitter, in Trump's win. And so I tried to explore in this article the transformation of those social networks into electoral arenas, and the role played so here by Elon Musk, but more broadly by tech giants in politics, because it applies to many others. And so, for example, if we look at the news this week, Zuckerberg announced on Tuesday that he will end content moderation and fact checking to replace it with like community notes, like on X. And so it's always supposedly in the name of defending freedom of speech, which is, as we know, is kind of meaningless and rather favors hateful and dominating discourse on those platforms. And so also the risks posed by the unlimited proliferation of, so talk about fake news, but we could add so the notions of mute news, the phenomenon of cold washing, etc. And so finally, my point was to say that our democracies are kind of not prepared for these phenomena, which is so the importance of the fake news, the massive role and the massive power of a few billionaires and tech giants, especially in the US, but who are more and more trying to influence even the European political scape. So to deep a little bit more diver into my conceptual framework, I would say my main interest is in the idea of how to govern by data or with data. So first, so I'm particularly interested in the data, as we could say that, which is the kind of the raw materials of all today's AI models, algorithm, automated systems. And so the idea is that so data, it's a digital or statistical object, which is kind of derived from reality, from the real world. And so there are three key moments in we could say the data life circle, which is like the source, the processing, the use. And the use of data and the collection of data serves the purpose of modeling and kind of putting reality into parameters. And so, of course, it comes with a reduction of reality to a few parameters that a model could handle. And so it then used as decision support in many predictive models and in many ways. And more especially, in fact, now it's the raw materials for AI systems, and it's kind of the root of everything. And so if we look at a little bit more on the kind of the history of the thought and the history of philosophy, which is leading to our situation today. So first, of course, there are two main ideas, two main concepts that play a key role in our views today. So which is the idea of progress and the idea of rationality, and that comes with a kind of a cult of reason, which is inherited from the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment philosophers, with the idea that progress would put forward the idea of a technical development for the better of the humankind and the human societies, and that the technical progress would also be a social and economic progress. And so this very idea is particularly embodied in the industrial progress from the Industrial Revolution. So, for example, already Condorcet said that there is an harmony between technical developments and the future of mankind. And for example, also Thomas Hobbes described reason as symbolic calculation. And so there is all this kind of background that is putting the idea of technical progress and the rational thinking on the forefront of what is the best way to develop our societies and to ensure democratic progress, social progress, economic progress, technical progress, etc. And so on my slide, I put two main illustration, and the first one is of course is here to represent the also maybe an instrumentalization of the idea of progress, which is so put into this painting by John Gast, which is a justification of the colonization of the Western societies on other societies around the planet, on the idea that Western societies were bringing we were bringing progress, we're bringing civilization to uncivilized people, and so of course this was one of the biggest downside of this. And the second one is maybe the reduction of all progress to the technical one, and saying that the technical revolution, the industrial revolution, was the best way and was the way of ensuring progress for everyone. But of course, we will see later, and we already see some of the downside that they exist. So, and another key issues, which is in the title of my presentation, and which is at the core of my research issues, which is the idea of the social contract, which is kind of the foundation of our modern conception of the state. And so all the perspective of all of the social contract perspectives, so even if there are different, so for example from Rousseau, Locke, Hobbes, etc., they kind of all seek to explore why rational individuals would be willing to give up some of their freedom in exchange for ensuring a social and political order. And so this is based on three main premises. Like the first one is that the society is the work of its members, and so it's their collective responsibility. The second one is that human beings are capable of using nature through technology. And so the third one is that each individual aspires to autonomy. And so within the social contract, so especially in Rousseau, there is this idea of the general will. And so it's based on the idea of the sovereign people making all the decisions, and through a form of general will, which is makes it possible, I would say, to pursue the common good while embodying the will of the individuals it is intended to govern. And so this idea of the general will is fundamental, is a fundamental myth of modern Western democratic societies. And so it's sometimes called a founding fiction. And so, of course, my point is that it's a founding fiction which is necessary to the collective representation of democracy, and so how we as citizens see ourselves within society and within democratic systems. The idea is that more and more there has been some critiques on the notion of the social contract. And so especially, so here I'm just talking about the notion of surveillance capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. But it's interesting because in her work, she specifically mentioned the idea of social contract, which is neither politics nor social contracts. It's capitalism, and increasingly surveillance capitalism that shapes the action. And so there is this idea that capitalism has become surveillance capitalism. And so the idea that the large-scale exploitation of personal data by big tech companies and even governments is then leading to a collapse of our representation of democracy, because our links from one another and uh, with institutions and governments is less and less based on those ideas of general will, of social contract, but more and more on the like the capitalist contractual relationship that is embodied in all the services provided by Google, Meta, and all the GAFAMs. And so yeah, and all of this then just comes together in an ideal of governance, because data is then seen as a mathematical, logical, and rational object. And so there is kind of a mathematization of the exercise of power. So on the basis of surveillance capitalism, there is an ideal of rational governance using this data. And so hence we have the tendency to consider data and then all the systems using those data as infallible, as opposed to a fallible human being. And so this leads to this mathematization of power. And so the profusion of data and data processing systems serves the government's model that I have evoked before. So we can talk about all the scoring systems within banking or insurance or in dating apps or in healthcare, in many governments offers. And so the practice of governance also involves now a whole range of influence tools, which is designed to kind of induce the citizen consumer to behave in the best possible way. And so there is a whole literature on the importance and on the scale of this influence and manipulation of the individual, with the main goal to modify desires and behaviors in real time. And so now the digital data form the raw materials for statistical power. That is to say that every decision is now based on statistical inputs, and less based on political discussion, political deliberation. And so, of course, for now, it's not especially to say if it's morally bad or good. It's just to say that objectively, there is a change in the way we see our society works. And so this governance by numbers is in fact a political choice, which is the quest for an impersonal form of power on the model of a governing machine, which that is to say that the main goal is always to create the fairer society, the fairest society, and to make the best possible decisions, even in a democratic way. But all this leads to, for example, what Rouvroy and Burns called algorithmic governability, which is the fact that decisions are now based on data processing and calculation rather than politics, law, social norms, discussion, deliberation, etc. So all this is like my conceptual basis of my work. And now if we, like I have three main examples, which are also problems, of course. So I will just get to that a little bit quickly. So the first one is of course the idea, the experiment of the social credit scoring systems in China, which is sometimes a source of a form of over-interpretation of a panoptic surveillance. And in fact, it's more like a kaleidoscope of systems that are operating at different types of levels, depending on the type of offense and the type of actors involved. And so these systems is the Chinese Communist Party response to a chronic difficulty in applying laws and regulation, especially in an authoritarian country where everything is like kind of centralized, and so it's very difficult to track how laws and regulations are applied on the field. And so it's aimed at individuals, but also at organizations, and particularly at companies and public authorities. And so it demonstrates a kind of example of governance by technology, governance by numbers, used to ensure the control of the Chinese Communist Party on its population and on its citizens. Maybe the second example is, well, it's a little bit what I've already said regarding my article in Le Monde, which is the importance taken by social networks in our societies and in public spaces. So because now more and more the public opinion is kind of formed online through social networks and online contents, which can be articles, videos, news reports, etc. And so as a result, the expression of people's opinion is translated into data that can be exploited by the algorithm of big tech corporations. Also because then opinions can be influenced online. So there have been various studies that have been carried out on the subject, demonstrating that some fake news circulates more than verified information, that deepfake have a major impact on the formation of public opinion, that other phenomena such as mute news have a kind of importance on those platforms, and because those platforms have become a medium of influence, and so individuals, groups, states kind of are using the characteristic of this platform to carry out their agendas or kind of influence, and so the social networks are then seen as electoral arenas because like the users use it to access information and also to sometimes intervene. Also, you when you're a political personality or media or other someone wanting to develop your thoughts and your opinions, you kind of have to play the algorithm game. Otherwise, you just won't be seen, and you won't be able to talk with your people, with your citizen, with your electoral basis, etc. And also, it is then used by politicians and many other like political actors, which are not only politicians, are used as a personal branding platform. And so now digital platforms contribute to the polarization of the public debate because they are kind of powerful machines, especially on some. There has been a study that saying that, especially on the conservative side, which is overexposed to partisan fake news or misinformation. And so the few platforms that receive the majority of opinions and exchanges hold significant power and importance. And so this also shows in a way that the influence now occurs less and less via the traditional actors, which could be family, friends, school, media, etc. And that the idea that the battle of public opinion is increasingly happening online. And so those digital public spaces are, however, controlled only by a few big tech companies. And so this very concentration of power in the hand of a few large companies, well, challenges the traditional democratic structures, and give them a really important power of influence. And the third example, which is, well,
excuse me, Adrien, do you show the surveillance capitalism slide again, or do you have other slides after?
It's still the same. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were on surveillance capitalism, so I imagine that you had more.
You were here, and so it doesn't work when I change the slide?
Yeah, no, I can't see. Yeah, we can't see. Yeah, we see just surveillance capitalism.
Okay. Maybe I'll try to stop the screen sharing and retry it, maybe.
We can watch an ideal of governance.
Yeah,
now.
I see when I go on the call, but I don't know why does it work. So when I change here, it doesn't work because I'm changing the slides.
Yeah, it worked. Oh.
Okay.
I can see some examples and problems.
It could be an issue with Kmit because you don't see the slide. The headline is some examples and problems.
Yeah, I see this.
Okay. And now is the new social credit scoring.
Okay.
With
Maybe it's just that it's a little bit. So I've talked about social credit scoring. Then normally you see social networks.
For me, it's stuck at social credit scoring.
Yeah, for me too.
Yeah, same.
Okay. And now it.
Now we see social networks, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe it's because and now biased data.
Yeah.
Okay, it's because I see why, but I don't really understand. So I was at biased data. So he.
Okay. You can say when you change slides, so we can.
Yeah. Okay. So I can. Okay. Great. And so the third example, was biased data. And so the idea that the biases within society and discrimination within society, and then replied or reproduced by data and the processing of those data, and so of course that raises many ethical issues that are very often discussed. To continue, so here I'm changing slides.
I have just a question about biased data. How do you make a difference between biased data and biased society? Because our society is biased too. So how far it's different for the data that for our way of thinking when we think about a CEO in a normal way, we don't usually think about a woman because of the society.
Yeah.
Different.
Well, when I was saying like the data reproduce the discrimination that are already happening in the real life, there is this idea, of course, that our societies are biased, or the discrimination, racism, sexism exist within our societies, and as data are statistical objects taken from reality, like as a as a matter of fact, they are very often biased as well. So there is this reproduction of societal biases within the data processing systems. But this has two more important impacts. The first one is that, as I was saying maybe a little bit at the beginning, like the idea that we tend to see all those technologies or all those systems are as infallible compared to fallible human beings. Then we tend to have an overconfidence in those systems, and so that prevents us from seeing like reality like this, which is that the data are biased and are reproducing biases already present within society. And the second one is that it raises the issue of the automatization of discrimination, because now, for example, so on this image, so it was a campaign by the feminist association Jamais Sans Elle, and so on the idea that using Midjourney, if you prompt imagine a CEO, it only presents like white men in their 50s. So of course this represents an existing bias within society, but it's also making it more dramatic, because if it was supposed to be really representative of the reality, there should be at least 2 or 3 images of a woman CEO. And so the fact that this represents no woman CEO shows that there is an aggravation of those very biases.
Okay.
So the third point is how does all this influence the power distribution within the states? So you see, like, you see the slide on centralization or decentralization of power.
Just the title.
Yeah. It's normal for now, which is the question I'm trying to raise, or I'm interested in, which is how within a democratic society does all those existing systems influence the centralization or decentralization of power. So the first idea that all the examples I mentioned earlier seem to kind of support the idea of a centralization, at least of expertise and power in a few hands, because these technologies are kind of used, far from democratizing the exercise of power, are kind of also reinforcing inequalities and kind of concentrate the power or posing a threat to democracy, based on the idea of centralization of expertise and power. And also because the second point is that it increases the surveillance power of states, corporate surveillance, and all the ideas of control societies. And so because thanks to platform capitalism, surveillance capitalism, now it is possible to govern behavior rather than just predict it. And so from this point on, we can see that how kind of a surveillance project is part of the political will to control its environment. And the third point is that decentralization, there is a centralization because we are witnessing an institutionalization of technology, which can be from within the hands of a few public institutions or even private one. And as often, this institutionalization can be the source of a form of alienation for the people. And so we tend to see it as, we tend to see the distribution of power going towards a more centralized way of exerting power. However, the idea normally that data is easily accessible and shared. And so there was a kind of technological optimism at the foundations of the digital age of internet, etc. And so this internet utopia was especially important, notably in the spaces of the American counterculture in the 80s, 90s. And so there was this idea even promoted by so Schmidt and Cohen in 2014 that the digital, I put the digital technologies will deconcentrate power away from states and institutions and transfer it to the individuals. And so there was normally kind of an idea of a shift from centralized power structure to decentralized institutions. And so, for example, the data is really available for counterpowers, which can be activists, opponents, journalists, or association, etc. And so, for example, the whistleblowers, such as Edward Snowden, for example, who revealed the vast surveillance program of the American state, or WikiLeaks, for example, they are making knowledge and data available thanks to this very characteristic of data, which is that it's supposed to be kind of easily accessible and shared. However, in the meantime, in fact, there is a disappearance of really alternative models. In the early days of the internet, there was several alternative models that were created in parallel. And so the digital world promises a major decentralization of the states, of the use of power, of equal exchanges, etc. However, what we have seen and witnessed is the creation of monopolies based on all the networks effects, for example. And so thanks to the massive infrastructures built up by the surveillance capitalism giants, well, in fact, there is a kind of now obligation to go through certain platforms, including for counterpowers. And so this is what is called by Klang and Madison, which is the domestication of political engagement online. That is to say that opponents must once again play the game of the platform and also expose themselves to the control or surveillance by the authorities regulating those same platforms. And so there was a strong technological optimism at the foundation of the digital age, and so that has now come to a more concentration of power or domestication of the use of those services online. So this led, in fact, more to a destructuration of power. That is to say that power is now no longer exercised through the usual institutions or through the usual levels of power. So first, there is a privatization of the exercise of power, so from the state to large technological companies. There is also a depersonalization of power. That is to say that politics are being replaced by automated management based on statistical correlation, statistical ideas. And third one, there is still a kind of emancipation. That is to say that individuals are emancipating themselves from the usual power relays or power levels, power structures. It could be the unions, the political parties, and even the state in a way. And so that all of this is kind of destructuring the structure of power that was put in place or that was creating during the whole the many centuries of the democratization of at first Western societies. And so this has a main impact. This has a main impact, which is it kind of reduce the scope of the political contract, because the more you automate decision, the more you reduce the scope available for political debate. So it's a new form of the whole idea that I was mentioning at the beginning, which is of a fair and optimal government based on the model of a machine, based on the governance by numbers. And so more and more, there is this idea to represent government and the way decision should be taken as a technique of power rather than as a result of the process of political deliberation. And so all that goes to reducing the scope of a political contract. We then comes to the notion of ethics. That is to say that now ethics is more and more present in many discussions. And so first, why ethics? In a way, every technological innovation comes from two main objectives, two main goals. So a theoretical goal, which is to understand and to invent something, and a practical goal, which is to develop a new practice to humans. And so the first one is a priori not concerned with ethics, because in our societies we don't really see the idea of understanding something as possibly ethically wrong. But of course the issues and the discussions comes with the practical one, so which is the developing a new practice, because there are some question that needs to be answered, and we can see there is room for debate, which is why we prefer this or that innovation, which individuals are really help, what freedom do we have to accept the technology or not. For example, on that freedom to accept or not the technology, in a way, the question of asking is never really asked, in a way. The question of choice is never really asked, and there is most often only the possibility of becoming used to the technological society, whereas you could be threatened with being excluded from the very society. And the last, which is what are the collateral effects. And so we can see here that ethics is mainly focusing on all those questions, and that is today what we are observing. So ethics today, show that there is a need for regulation. However, nowadays technology ethics cannot be reduced, and should not be reduced to regulation and deciding which technology is allowed and which one is not. Because technology ethics is more about many different things, and not just the question of what technology should be permitted and what technology should not be. But that's because mainly today, when we hear the word ethics, we tend to represent the notion of regulation. And so ethical regulations now kind of often remain technical and legal, and this kind of exclude the individuals from the political ethical debate. And so finally, in a way, if some countries or international institutions try to regulate the use of those systems, they are also judge and jury in a way, because the European Union, governments, international institutions, they also use these technologies while trying to limit them, which is of course a kind of strong limit here. But in any case, ethics is therefore a way of extending the boundaries of the contract and trying to regain political control on those technological matters. And so finally, we come to the final section, which is, so now, how should we... yes?
Yes. So, sorry, could you expand on the last bit about ethics extending the boundaries?
Yeah,
I didn't.
Okay. Yeah. I was saying a few slides away that the more you automate decisions, the more you reduce the scope of political discussion. And so on the other side, trying to develop some ethical regulations is a way to re-extend the boundaries of the contract, saying that, okay, so all those things that are being automated, well, it's not okay just to watch and accept, which we should also interfere in the process. And we should regulate, and we should change our practices, and we should develop things in different kinds of way. And so that's why I wanted to say, like, saying re-extending the boundaries of the contract.
Okay, and so it's the fact that it's the regulations of those technologies that are a way to extend this. Okay.
Yeah, it's a way, and even like if we take ethics as a like even as a philosophical matter of how do we use, accept, develop those technology, even having this discussion is a way of re-extending the boundaries of our discussions or of political debate, etc. So no problem. So we come to the last section, which is so how should we redefine maybe a social contract? Is there a way of doing so? Well, maybe the first things to observe is the fact that maybe now big tech corporations are kind of new members of the social contract. Of course, like as in the case of social networks, the difficulty of controlling the platform, controlling AI is a kind of political matter, but it's also the idea that, well, if we, so here I'm taking the example of the US because it's there that it's the most visible or the most prominent. The way that Silicon Valley is, well, of course, historically close to US Democratic Party, but in fact, we can see that now more and more figures are kind of making an exception. So, of course, there is our friend Elon Musk, which was a big Trump supporter and is now kind of like Doge minister of reducing the administration cost. We could also mention Peter Thiel, which funded the campaign of J.D. Vance, the first campaign of J.D. Vance, which is now the future vice president. And in fact, we can see that on this subject, like companies are kind of calculating their interest because so during the campaign, Trump promised an end to every regulation. There is this idea of a competition between companies. So once Trump has won, well, we can see that following the last declaration of Zuckerberg, for example, or the last action by Jeff Bezos or others, that they have an interest in just also going with the flow in a way, and trying to help Trump putting an attack or an offensive against especially European regulations on this matter. And this is mainly based on the observation that technology always seems kind to be outside of society. It's like rarely discussed democratically or by the general public, and it really never had been. But of course, in fact, tech is a political issue. It's not just a technical one, mainly because there is always a human will, in a way, a certain vision of the world that is carried out by those technology. And so that because tech implies responsibility, so it could be tech implies responsibility. And the problem is that our states are kind of not armed, not prepared to face this change in our democratic representation of how our social contract is functioning, how our democratic societies are functioning. And so the last moment for the time I have left, I'm going to go in a little bit more into the perspective, so which is part of the state of my current reflection of the idea of redefining the social contract. So we can see that we can see different like hypotheses. Like the first one is that should we abandon an idea of a social contract because like if we follow some of the arguments in favor, because there is a redistribution, a destructuration of power, of borders, of moral values, and a return of a form of feudalism. So depending on the platform you're using, the technology you're using, your allegiance level with certain companies, and the individualization of offer and practices, in a way, we can say that the social contract is, in a way, no more existing because what was supposed to ensure it is no longer here. Well, the main objection is that, well, in a way, it's hard to imagine. We could say that it could lead to a kind of chaos or a not desirable future, and that they always had some form of political contract, at least in a way, in the idea that how we represent ourselves, the state. Like, we often tend to consider that the politicians, we have that contractual relationship with the politicians, with the states, with the whole states organization, state institutions. But here, so we kind of meet the original critics against the notion of the social contract, saying that in a way it's something that is not relevant to the discussion on the. I think that there is a comment. GAFAM égale Big Tech, absolutely. So the second hypothesis, in a way, is like, should we go further into the integration of technology within the social contract? And so could the machine define the social contract, or the new one? In a way, we could say that we could obtain a real digital social contract or real digital society once we integrate a kind of value of maximization function within the code, in a way. Like, well, it's more on perspective. But it's the idea that, in a way, we could say that government and politicians have a kind of a dream of knowing at every moment what is the state of the opinion, what is the state of the society, and saying that, okay, their dream is like to always know automatically what the people are thinking, what the people want, and so that they could ask ChatGPT, okay, could you rewrite all the rules, but with by maximizing the notion of, let's say, happiness. And so every rule would be rewritten and redefined. So of course this idea is like pretty dangerous, and because the main objection is that there are always human wills, or at least human ideologies, based on the biases we have talked about, based on how all those systems are created and used. So this leads us to the third hypothesis, which is, do we need a new transnational contract? With this idea that all countries that are connected to the network are kind of facing similar problems, and so they could share norms, standards, etc. Of course, when we talk about regulation or ethics, we can see that the European Union is far ahead of the other big states on the planet. But in a way, every state is kind of on the same path, just at different steps. In a way, but the two main objections that, well, the first one is that there are still strong cultural differences. So I've put a moral machine experiment, but saying that regarding our culture, our religious background, we don't really expect systems, some machines to operate the same way if you are in Japan or if you are in France or in the US. The second objection is that states deal with digital technology on the national basis. When you hear a speech by Macron or I don't know, they all talk about national strategy, national sovereignty, national investments, etc. And so maybe the idea is like to define a kind of meta contract, and so to create a social contract on two levels, one which is a kind of a national one, similar to the one which is existing today, and the second one more meta or at a more broader level, with all the norms and regulations shared by all the countries connected to the network or using technology. So yeah, well, basically that was all my my research and the state of my current reflections. So I hope it interested you, and well, thanks to Nosol.
Thank you very much for your talk. I have questions, but are there any other questions before I take mine?
Yeah, I have some. Just the point before, you talked about a new transnational contract, and you talked about the differences between countries. So if we create this transnational contract, it will perhaps create problematics such as for the climate change, which countries is impacted, which countries had more contributed to that. So do you think that this transnational contract is still something to think about, depending on these differences between countries and developments?
Yeah, thanks for the question. In fact, well, of course, I'm not always sure about that last that last proposition, that last slide. But the idea is that, in a way, defining a meta contract could be a way of taking into account the relationships between all the countries. For example, now, so on climate change, it could include, for example, what many countries from the south are asking, which is a kind of redistribution of wealth, of investment, of money from the richer state to those more developing states. And on the case of technology, now for ChatGPT to work, or for Instagram or any other platform to work, those companies are using what is called the digital labor, which are most often poor workers in poor countries, paid a few dollars a day to make the system like work for the Western societies, and those are most often excluded from the debates, from the ethical regulations. And so if we define a meta contract, we could include those like members, those players of the contract within the terms of the contract.
Okay, thank you. So I can continue. The second question, could the machine define the new contract? Do you think that even asking the question is interesting? As you said before, perhaps it could be, should the machine define the new contract or something like this? Why do you ask the question like this, even if we can imagine all the consequences of it. I am clear. Did you understand?
I don't really understand your question. Like it's like
I find this question, even asking the question is already too far for me.
okay.
The first one, should we abandon the idea of contract? I can imagine it, I can think about it, but could the machine define the new contract? I can't even imagine it, and asking the question make people think about it, perhaps, and perhaps one day someone will watch your show and think, okay, let's go, I will create a machine that create a new social contract. I don't know, but what do you think about this question and the consequences?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm of course not like promoting this idea, but the it was like this hypothetical question is trying to go forward in the direction that we have taken with delegating more and more tasks to automated systems. And so, in a way, we could say that once we have automated the way people are reading something or are, even voting, or the way people are dealing with governments, the way people are, I don't know, all those kind of things. You could say that the next step would be to rewrite everything in a really like take optimist view. My point is to say that I think that many people would not see any problem in that, and would consider that as the machine is infallible and as the machine will be one day more intelligent than us. So I'm putting brackets here. We should ask the machine, and we should redefine our society thanks to all the data that is collected. Yeah, so it's not really like what I am promoting, but it's saying that I think that many people are seeing the machine or seeing the technological future like that.
Okay, so it's different from the question, could the machine help us defining a new contract? It's you.
Yeah, it's more dystopian, but
okay.
But of course, maybe a middle question between the two is like, could the machine help us?
Okay.
Yeah, because that's exactly what Tournesol is trying to do, right? It's kind of a machine that aims to help or like contribute to collaborative writing a social contract.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Peva, you have a question?
Well, it was about the same thing, but the answer.
Okay, well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I would have a more pessimistic questions. Is like, you know, that these days it's not great in terms of social contracts, and in terms of transnational contracts as well, it's like getting harder, and also like you may not even want to collaborate with some countries. So is it the right scale to think of a transnational goal for this, or and even like on the national scale? Like if I'm living in the US right now, or if I was like Isabella is from Romania, if you're in Romania right now, even in France, like, yeah, is the national scale still the right scale, or do we have to also build social contracts at different scales?
It's a good question. Well, in a way, we could say that the micro scaling of social contract, if we could say that, like reducing the scale of the social contract. Well, I think that there are two ways of seeing that. The first one would be to say that indeed, considering a smaller portion of the population or smaller countries would be more interesting and would be better. For example, if we take Rousseau, for example, he says that the perfect size for a democratic society is Corsica, which is so a small island, a few people, and so because in his mind, the best democracy is more like direct democracy, and so it's not manageable if there are millions and millions of citizens. Like, it's impossible for everyone to know everyone, to discuss with everyone, so it's impossible. So in a way, yes, like reducing the scale of the social contract could help. The problem is that it's joining the observation of the more transnational contract or meta contract, which is to say that on the technological issues, many countries are facing the same problems and are all trying to go on the same path. And so, as internet and as technology has not really borders, maybe this macro scaling would be not good enough or insufficient. So maybe the idea is defining a meta contract. Well, maybe putting like if we put 3 layers of contracts, I don't know, but like I think that in this institutional architecture, the meta one is kind of still relevant from the observation of I was saying, and maybe so the next level could be raised, and like going from micro contract to meta contract, and maybe erasing the middle one, which would be the national one. Yeah, it's a good point. I will.
Yeah, maybe relatedly, because on the web, like there's a lot of communities that are trying to self-organize, like us currently here in this in Discord, but like even more so like on Reddit or and so on. And I think it's there can be some interesting like informal social contracts within these communities. But there's also, of course, this issue of like small communities becoming radicalized, and you may still want coordination at a global level. I don't know if it's something that's been looked into, like how to analyze these, the social contracts already existing informally on the internet.
So sorry, what is your question exactly? So has there been some studies or some thoughts on that?
Trying to like analyze how communities online self-organize, and if there are some sort of social contracts within them, and what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. Well, to my mind right now, I don't really know. I know that like currently, when someone, a writer or philosopher, is getting interested in this on these issues of social contract and the downsizing of the social contract, it's the idea of techno-feudalism, which is gaining more and more importance today. So it's more on the negative side, saying that now the downsizing of the contract is more related to different companies rather than small communities. Well, the honest answer is that I don't really know. But of course, I guess it's kind of linked to the utopia of internet, especially at the beginning, of especially those self-organized communities that are happening thanks to digital technology. So I think it's more like in this tradition, and so yeah, it's interesting. But it would be interesting to really know how to differentiate like tech feudalism and this kind of self-organized. I know that I want to, but for now I didn't do it. But it's also linked to all those alternative way of considering the institutional architecture, especially if we look at the anarchist anarcho-syndicalism way of considering society, with those kind of smaller groups, smaller societies, and organizing themselves. And so, yeah, I think that it's an interesting path.
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe that's because I'm not very familiar with the concept of social contract. But is there a difference, a meaningful difference between defining a social contract and executing a social contract? Because as I picture it, there is putting some content, deciding on the content of the social contract, and then there is also executing it or enforcing it. And is it a meaningful distinction to understand the concept, or does it relate to what we've discussed here?
I think it's meaningful because like the idea of a social contract is very theoretical. Like yeah, for example, but yeah, so it's the same thing with the laws, for example. Like everything is very theoretical. Like you're saying, okay, society should work in a certain way, and then the execution can sometimes be more complicated. So, for example, yeah. So the example of the Isabella with corruption, for example. But yeah, and even on a more theoretical level, there is the idea of, okay, we consider the social contract as the basis of society, but now how do we make it happen? So is it representative democracy? Is it direct democracy? Is it on the regional level? Is it on the state level? Yeah, is it with a king and a parliament, etc., etc.? So in fact, there are many ways of exercising, applying the theory of the social. Yep.
Yeah, I also maybe review on Eva's question, because I was also not very familiar with the social contract, but I'm trying to wrap my head around it. So there's like the state and the individual, and they make a contract. The individual decides, okay, I'm gonna give up some freedom to the state in exchange of security, right? This is maybe the
Kind of, yeah. Well, normally is that it's the contract between the people, between the individuals that create the states.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, maybe. Oh, because I was trying then to put a third actor, like the tech, like
Yep.
in the case of what you were illustrating maybe before with the question, can the machine be the one that writes this contract? Then it would be like the machine and the individual, and the state would kind of disappear in this extreme, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In a way, well, yeah. So state could disappear, or yeah. Well, maybe state then would be reduced. Well, state would be the machine then. Well, in a way, like it will be no longer the individual that create the states, but the machine which is creating the states, and so it would be more like a governing machine that is like self-organizing, like such as small communities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then in this other scenario, that's the last one that you propose, that there's some contracts on like in which the technology is regulated. I was trying to picture how, even geometrically, how that would be, but maybe I'm still trying to wrap my head around this.
Well, if you all have questions afterwards, you can always send me send me an email. We'd be happy to answer it. But yeah, well,
Maybe to help clarify this, would you say, like, for instance, Wikipedia, I think, is an interesting community, Wikipedia. And so would you say that there's a social contract between Wikipedia contributors? Because it's an interesting example as well, because, like, the machines, like the algorithms play a very central role in the governance of Wikipedia.
Yeah. Well, in what way does the algorithm play a great role in the governance of Wikipedia?
I mean, for one thing, like, it defines the interfaces through which people can contribute, interact, and so on. There are some basic mechanisms, and some of it is automated. So, for instance, like removing trolls and like fake contributions. Some of it is automated.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. So the example of Wikipedia is kind of a way, is kind of a good example of on how, like, people can, like, there is an implied social contract on Wikipedia between the people participating in Wikipedia, the people creating and managing Wikipedia, and the people reading it. So all those parties of are kind of signing a virtual contract, which is more a knowledge contract in a way. And so, yeah, well, the delegation of certain tasks to algorithm in this context is an example of how technology could help reinstoring or installing the social contract in the digital age. Alexander, you know what's the purpose imaging that kind of digital what about errors, bugs, hacks, and even randomness of such? How to deal with the consequences of such a case?
This never happens. There's no bug.
No bugs. No, it's perfect. It's infallible. Yeah. So absolutely, I should have said it and put it in the objection of the second scenario. But of course, like, it's yeah. Well, absolutely. Well, how to deal with the consequences of such a case? Well, chaos, chaos, dystopia. Well, you can call it whatever you want. Of course, those are like the objection of on the second scenario, and nobody wants that.
And for the third scenario, like, what do you think are the incentives for it to happen, or in a more, maybe intentional way?
Yeah, well, in a more practical way, what do you want to say? Well, there has been some attempt to redefine democracy, or to redefine the way our democratic system work. For example, if we think about the citizen assemblies on some issues, for example, the climate, like, with people randomly selected and that are working for several months on the subject, and then are proposing some laws and regulations. This is well, we should imply that those suggestions then should be put into concrete action, but theoretically, this is a way of incentivizing people to participate in the political process, in the democratic redefinition of the terms of the social contract. But I think that all that, in a way, it's like on the climate issues, which is it's making people more conscious of the issues, educating. Well, Rousseau, in his work, say that in order to create to build a social contract and a free society, the people should be taught to be free. And so maybe it's a way of seeing how this new social contract should be reimagined, like by, I don't know, education, facilitating political participation, making those issues more political. Because one of the things, it was one of the slides that saying that technology is never part of the contract. It's never discussed. It's never. There is never a question during a political debate on, well, what is your thought on AI? What should we do, etc. It's always the same, like, topics on purchasing power, immigration. I don't know. And so, yeah, but by just making those issues political, it would be a way for the people to, like, have a clearer mind of what is at stakes here.
Like the New Zealand, right? They banned social media for teenagers under 16. Right? This would
Yeah,
Australia.
Australia, I think.
Okay, Australia. Sorry.
But yeah. For example,
And Albania also
Albania also. Well,
but for all, for 1 year. I
TikTok.
think. Albania, TikTok. I think they banned TikTok.
Oh, that's interesting.
For 1 year.
okay.
Any other question?
Yes, a small one. You talked about community notes. Do you study these a lot? You said that Meta came from fact-checking to community notes. And do you study it? Because in Tournesol we think that community notes is a good could be a good way to make citizens more active on the way they check information, for example, because there are too much information to be just fact-checked by individuals. So do you study a little that?
Well, to be honest, I don't really study community notes, but for what I know about that, well, theoretically, in fact, I agree, and sometimes even when you are on X, you see some community notes on tweets that are really useful because they are like quoting some sources and like are kind of helping you to understand or to see if something is a fake news or not, or if something is can be trusted or not. So I don't know. The only problem is that it's, well, in a way, it's always the same issue, which is how it is managed. Because, for example, on X, there are also many community notes which are really problematic because they are in reverse reinforcing some fake news and disinformation, all those phenomena. So in a way, of course, community notes are important, but maybe I guess they should be combined with other instruments. I don't know, for example, the de-anonymization of the people making the community notes, of transparency, of quoting reliable sources, so those kind of things, I guess.
Yeah. One big issue for Twitter's community notes is that they've been mostly hacked because there's like very little.
And the main problem with everything is that it can always be hacked. So
yeah,
and like even the best ideas can be can
Yeah.
be hacked. Yeah, for example, I've seen that, for example, on Instagram, many far right, well, bots or even real people are kind of signaling multiple times the account of more leftist people,
Yeah.
just to make them ban automatically by the algorithm. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the bigger issue is that people don't invest, companies don't invest enough
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
security.
In the human, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe another remark I would have is um, like in Tournesol, like what we care really most about is how do we govern machines, govern the technologies, and so on. And typically, the idea of Tournesol is to make sure that the recommendation algorithm results from a vote or as democratic as possible, as secure as possible, with expertise, knowledge, and so on. So that's like um, I guess it's the same for the social contract. Like the question is like, how do we govern this? Like, who gets to influence this or that? And for instance, the striking thing about the Wikipedia example is that Wikipedians are using a free software and they can edit it as they wish and like they vote on what kind of functionalities should be added and so on. Whereas well, yeah, I don't have a say in what TikTok recommends next. Yeah, I'm not sure I have a clear question, but um, like, do you see
So you mean
similarities?
like
Yeah,
the features of the product should also, and the way the algorithm work
yeah,
should also be more democratic.
yeah, and like if it's a machine learning algorithm, it's learning from data, then you can actually, if you have citizens and you want them to participate, you can collect their data and the algorithm then has the shape of whatever, like it results from citizens' participations in a more carefully designed manner. Yeah, I'm not sure I have a clear question, but like maybe this similarity between technology governance and social contract governance. Do you see this as a similarity or?
Well, maybe in a way the main difference or a key issue here is like it relates to the question from Peva on is there a difference between like a theoretical social contract and the way we exercise the social contract, and so maybe this leads to the how do we control the implementation or the functioning of a platform of democratic social contract. And so in a way the main difference, like supposedly like a society is governed thanks to like real people, or I don't know, with people having clear responsibilities, or with people that you can target, or you see who is responsible, who is taking which decision, and so that there is a relationship between you and the politician, or you and the people taking the decision, and so that you can ask them if there is a problem, you can sue them if there is a problem, and so this kind of retaliation that you can have is, I guess, it's key in making a social contract work. And so maybe it's the difference with like a social media platform, for example, or any other platform, which is it's really just theoretical. And so the whole making sure that everything is going well is totally automated. And so this leads to all the problems that we know about hacking, I don't know, about automatingly putting fake news in the forefront of recommender systems, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So
But this is an example of a bad algorithm, I'd say.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are examples or less bad algorithms. I mean, we're trying to be one of them.
Absolutely. No, but to be more optimistic is like, of course. So all the issue is like, what is the algorithm? What for? Who is designing it? If there is a problem, who can I see? Who can I deal with? Etc. Etc. So it's like putting all those tools or those instruments to ensure that everything is going well in a way.
So it also relates to remarks and stuff. The way I see it is, for example, automation. For me, I think it becomes necessary when we want to address the scale, and it looks like on the Corsican island we can have a functioning democratic social contract, and then we like it, and we would like the bigger ones to share the same features, and maybe that's why we are trying to imagine algorithms to scale those practices. And so maybe you already answered that question, but you mentioned that there were already arguments for or against the scalability of social contract, like, or is this something like is there is this something that has been studied, how to scale a social contract?
Well, I don't know all the literature about that, but in a way, it's more about like political theory and political science, I would say, but so it's more on like seeing how really practically a democratic society is functioning or should function. But it all comes to the institutional architecture. It all comes to once you're I don't know creating a country, I don't know what are you putting in place to favor the democratic feeling, or I don't know, to favor democratic participation or not, which type of voting system are you using, and so maybe the main thing for scalability of the social contract is maybe, I don't know, but historically speaking, it's what has happened is going from direct democracy to representative democracy. Because as long as you're too numerous to really to voice each opinion, like you have to put some layers between your political opinion and the law and the political representation. And so there is the vote, there is the deputies. For example, the European Union is another layer put ahead of the national layer. And so for now, most of the direct democracies examples are like smaller countries. If we think about, I don't know, Switzerland, for example, which have the
There are many of us.
Switzerland, which is a kind of more advanced or more direct democracy than the other European countries. I guess it's also mainly linked to the size of the country and the scale of the votation that are used.
And it's very local, like it's the canton, so it's not on the. I mean,
maybe it's in this idea, algorithm could be a way of scaling direct democracy. So because now, so algorithm and like digital technologies are erasing borders, are erasing physical problems, and so theoretically everyone could voice their opinion thanks to digital technology. So maybe it's a way of like scaling direct democracy.
Yeah. Like a remark that we sometimes make is that it's like c'est Gilles Dowek and Serge Abitboul made this remark is that in democracy, like today's democracy in France, for instance, we are voting a few bits of information every 5 years, and as opposed to this, like our internet is like millions of billions of times faster.
Yeah, and in a way, on digital platforms, we transfer bits of information every second, and so there is kind of a discrepancy or a big difference, a dichotomy even between how our democratic system is functioning, which is still in a like traditional way, and how do we, on the everyday basis, voice our opinion, create our opinions, etc.
Cool. I think there's another question, but I feel like we've taken so much of your time already.
I think I would have to leave. Anyway, it was really nice.
So I think we can close it here. Thank you a lot, Adrien, for your time.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.